Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 14th of February of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting details, updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Donetsk direction, and we're going to start with Selidova. If you remember, yesterday we were talking about the Russian strike on the polygon against the Ukrainian forces. To tell the truth, we were talking about the reports that we were receiving during the day of that strike, and today some sources continue publishing the photos of destroyed buildings, but very likely this is not just the results of yesterday's Russian strike, but this is the results of the previous strikes and so on. Another important thing, during the previous day we received some video from this almost the same area. On this video we can see the Ukrainians who were located in the vicinity of hospital, and the author of this video who was making a video, he was in the vicinity of morgue, and he was talking about significant number of losses. He didn't provide us the real numbers, just saying that a lot of people, a lot of dead people or something like this. But why have I started with this video, with this report, with this part? Because I was expecting the Ministry of Defense report about the strikes in Selidova, and to tell the truth, today the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation haven't provided any details, any updates regarding that attack. They behave themselves as if there were no strikes in Selidova, and this is very weird. Maybe the Russians still calculate and count the losses of the Ukrainians, and maybe later they're going to provide us more details, but as of 14th of February of, let's say, 8 p.m. of the local time, we still haven't received even a single confirmation from the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation about any strikes in Selidova against the concentration of Ukrainian forces. I'll remind you that there was just one video from Tsukurina, and we can't count the losses, and there were around 12 armored vehicles and just up to 40 soldiers, but not more. Now we are moving to Avdiivka, and we continue receiving a lot of updates. As you can see, I have adjusted the map, I have added the blocks. There is like currently 2 states of the territories. I will update the map as well in the future. I think that it's better to use for Russians at least 2 types of polygons. The first type is the Russian geolocated confirms progress, and of course we also need, let's say, the Russian unconfirmed progress according to reliable resources. It gives us better understanding, of course, and I think that now everything is so dynamic that sometimes we're receiving the news, the geolocated videos from the ground very let's say far from the date when it happens. So that's why we will adjust the map, and we will adjust the configuration of the presentation of the territory in the very near future. Now let's talk about the situation. Once again, according to information we have, the Russians managed to establish control over the industrial avenue, and they managed to cut this territory, and basically Avdiivka is encircled. It's not a cauldron, it's not already operational encirclement. Very likely that this is a tactical encirclement, and the Ukrainians would have significant number of problems if they took a decision to start withdrawing the central and the eastern part of Avdiivka, let's say massively. Of course, the Ukrainians still confirms that the soldiers in the central part still have possibilities to use small groups of 10-15 people for evacuation and abandoning their positions, and sometimes it works, and according to information we have, just during the previous 2 days, the garrison of Ukrainian soldiers in Avdiivka was reduced till 30% for, let's say, for another 30%. So we see that there are less and less forces. As you know, today Zelensky have had the meeting with the officers, with Syrsky himself in Kiev. We have even the video and some footage, some evidence of that meeting. As you can see, he collected everyone, and probably he was listening to reports of the new commander-in-chief about the situation. Currently we don't know for sure what kind of decision they took on this meeting, but very likely they don't have any other options. At least the minimal thing they can do is to hold as long as possible the flanks in Avdiivka, with the purpose to allow as many as possible soldiers to survive and to evacuate from the central, eastern and the southern part of Avdiivka. From the other side, for example, the commander of Tavria, of the Ukrainian tactical group Tavria, Dmitry Likhovy, he's the head of this direction, reported today and started preparing the population of Ukraine that sooner or later the Ukrainians would be forced to abandon Avdiivka. He was saying like Avdiivka is not so important. It is much more important to save the life of the personnel, and it's the most important is to not to lose army, and the, let's say, the rocks and stones and steel is not important in the battle when talking about the global scope and so on. So that was something like the beginning of preparation. From the other side, the Russians were saying that the situation in Ukraine in Zelensky meeting was so bad, so poor, and according to information we have today or upcoming hours or maybe upcoming days, I'm not saying that this situation can be resolved within a day, but in the very near future the Russians are going to launch the final offensive operation, not from the central part, not from industrial F, because the industrial F was already cut off by the Russians. The Russians, according to some sources, are going to launch the offensive operation from the south on the line between Opytne, Vodyane, former air defense base, and Tsarskaya Khota. And the Russians are going to move and to get as close as possible to the second supply road that goes from Severnaya to Avdiivka. The first one from Orlovka to chemical plants to the central part was already cut off, and now the Russians are planning to cut the last support road, and after that the Russians are going to make ultimatum to Ukrainians and suggest them to surrender without clashes, or they can, I don't know what they can rely on. But the source that provided this piece of information reported that the Russians are planning to make ultimatum this upcoming night. So it will be very interesting to see whether let's say his projections would be confirmed or not. But anyway, the situation for the Ukrainians is getting worse and worse. Once again, the Russians are planning to do something like this, and if they are able to establish control over this territory within the next few days or maybe this night, then this is going to be like collapse and cauldron of Ukrainians without any ultimatum. But of course the Russians will propose to Ukrainians to surrender without weapon, without ammo, and to start walking to Severnaya. They will make lots of photo videos to publish these videos and photos all over the world. When talking about Avdiivka itself, at least at 8 p.m. of the local time from the central part, from the industrial avenue, we haven't received more additional details about further Russian progress. During the day we had some updates about the establishing control over the statue. But there are two statues in Avdiivka. One statue is located in this part of Avdiivka, the second one in the vicinity of Brivno. But we don't have any updates whether what kind of statue was captured by the Russians. Also, the Russians published some evidence of full fire control of the main supply roads. On this video, we can see how two light vehicles were heading in direction of the central part of Avdiivka, in direction of Brivno or the gas stations. But the Russians managed to discover both of them and to destroy both of them with artillery rounds, artillery attacks, all on set. So this video shown us that at least this road is already under complete Russian fire control, and the Ukrainians can't use this for proper evacuation, rotation, support and supply. Furthermore, the Russians continue publishing the video of artillery strikes against Ukrainian positions along industrial F, which also confirms that not 100% of industrial F is under Russian control, just part, but probably this part is enough to cut the supply and support of the central part. Furthermore, the Russians continue publishing the very cool videos. I'm talking not about the situation, but about the scenes and about the picture we can see right now. The Russians were publishing the videos of FAB bombings of the central part of Avdiivka, of FAB bombings of the intersections of road in the central between 9th quarter and the central part and the southern part. So the area of main supply roads was completely under fire and aviation bombing. The Russians reported that during the previous night the Russians used also, let's say, the record number of the aviation bombs, more than 30, and today they will continue this process. They will continue this process until they start their tank attack from Vodyane, Opytne to the 9th quarter. When talking about 9th quarter, we received very interesting video. This video was geolocated. The Ukrainian soldiers were moving from one part from one building to another and pay attention how, let's say, how carefully they were moving. At least they were moving not just even carefully, very slowly, very silently. And this video tells me that when I saw this video for the first time, first thing that came to my mind that these guys, when they were moving in the 9th block, weren't 400% sure that some buildings in this area haven't been already by the under the Russian control. So this is like the impression I had when I watched this video for the first time. Of course, the Russians still haven't resolved the issues with the former air defense base. Maybe they don't need to solve because of tank attack to the 9th quarter. Also, we continue receiving some videos from the southern part, which confirms that there are still Ukrainians in this area. The Russians were bombing this territory heavily, as you can see. So the battle for Avdiivka continues. Very likely this night we're going to receive more updates, and to tell the truth, I'm waiting for Ultimatum. Now we are moving further to the western part. As you can see, on Avdiivka direction, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians published at least 3 videos of Lancet strikes against the Ukrainian armored vehicles and personal carriers. On this video we see one strike. The Strela S tried to shut down the Russians, but they couldn't do this, and a few more Lancet strikes took place, one on the north of Krasnogorovka. Another artillery system was destroyed as a result of Lancet strike, and another Lancet strike took place behind Georgievka to the south of Maximilianovka. The artillery system D-30 was destroyed as a result of Lancet strike. So today, to tell the truth, the Russians published lots of Lancet strikes, and we will move through all of them. Additional progress, according to some mappers, the Russians have further to the west of Mariinka. Additional lines were captured. The Russians basically improved their positions to the west in direction of the strongholds to the south of Georgievka and to the north of Pobeda. Novomikhailivka, just few updates about additional progress from the eastern direction to the central. Just one street, according to some mappers, was captured as a result of Russian offensive operation. Nothing special. Everybody is expecting to receive some interesting and very interesting news from Avdiivka. Now we are moving to Bakhmut-Artyomov's direction. As you can see, I have adjusted the map in the vicinity of Popovy Forest and to the south to the stronghold by the name of Bel, Kolokolchik, this one. I made this correction based on the official statement of 98th Division. As you know, 98th Division is responsible for Russian offensive operation in the direction of Chasov Yar, Bogdanovka, along the railways, and to the north of Ivanovskaya. All the videos we saw in this area were published by 98th Division. For example, this is one of the videos. Most of the videos about clashes in this area in Bogdanovka and Popovy Forest for this territory were published by them. So according to official statement, the Russians continue offensive operation in 2 directions. The first direction, they're moving in direction of Kanal and Chasov Yar, and we were just talking about this yesterday in the previous videos. And the second statement is that 98th Division is moving further to the south in direction of Ivanovskaya. And exactly in that statement, the Russians confirmed the progress and control over Kolokolchik, or the Bel fortification. So we see more or less the picture of Russian progress. And when talking about the situation, let's say about Chasov Yar, we received some videos, but mainly the Russians are bombing this territory with FAB 500 without any progress on the ground. So they're moving there, but for now just with some pressure of artillery or aviation bombs. Chasov Yar is under very heavy fire. As you can see, there are a lot of high-rise buildings, there are a lot of forests around this area. So this is not so simple and easy job to enter this part of Chasov Yar when attacking in front. Of course, it's good to somehow to bypass either from the north or from the south. And when talking about bypassing this territory from the south, significantly interesting updates are coming from Ivanovskaya. And today, for the first time since the beginning of the ground operation inside of Ivanovskaya, the Ukrainian sources published the video of how they were bombing and attacking the Russian forces on the eastern outskirts, on the eastern edge of the village. We will not watch this video till the end because there are a lot of very difficult scenes and, let's say, part of the movie. The Ukrainians were bombing and attacking the Russian forces, who managed to dig in deeper in this area. Currently, I'm not sure for 100% what kind of territory, what territory is under Russian control, but for sure they are here. And according to some updates and according to some talks and rumors, very likely that the Russians currently control something like this on the eastern edge of Ivanovska. So this is approximately the progress of the Russians, but this progress is without any geolocated confirmation. The Ukrainians are trying to slow down and to hold the Russians as long as possible, and for now we see that it's not something that they're doing very good, because basically the Ukrainian forces in Ivanovskaya are already cut off from the mainland. The Russians are bombing the village heavily with all types of weapons they have, and not just bombing, the Russians also control the main supply road that Ukrainians have along N32 road. So this is the main supply road, this one. And the Ukrainians still use this road for supplying and supporting their forces. And today the Russians published another video of how the Ukrainian light vehicle or evacuation machine or support machine was heading inside of the village. And as you can see, once again, the video was published by the 98th Division. This armored vehicle or light vehicle was destroyed. We see the landing operation, and this light vehicle was tracked by a Russian drone. And at some point we see a mortar probably strike, or maybe Krasnopol strike, and as a result of the strike the entire Ukrainian small crew or group was destroyed. So basically, according to this, we can say that Ivanovska is almost, let's say, half encircled. The Russians are moving from the north, from the Bel fortification or Kolokolchik, and we can say that during the next days we're going to receive some updates about further Russian progress, at least in this direction, and so basically to the north of Ivanovska. The Russians, as I understand, currently the most important target for them is to enter this forest belt to the southeast of Chasov Yar or to the northwest of Ivanovska, and to establish control over something like this. This is not so difficult as I see, because of very, let's say, critical situation for the Ukrainians and very, let's say very big problems to create defense in this area. And as soon as the Russians are able to enter this territory, then we can start counting days when Ivanovska is going to fall. And after Ivanovska, of course, it will also one by one, step by step, lead to the situation when Klishchevka and Andreevka fortifications will fall as well. Furthermore, we got additional Lancet strikes from this territory. The Russians, for example, in this video show us of how they managed to discover the Ukrainian Strela S-1 air defense system, and after that, as a result of Lancet strike, this air defense system was destroyed. Chasov Yar is under very heavy artillery fire. On this video we can see another bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions, lots of explosions, lots of vehicles, defense positions, temporary fire positions are destroying every single day from hour to another hour. So the situation in Avdiivka, situation in Ivanovska and in Novomikhailivka continue developing not in Ukrainian favor. Now we are moving to Bilogorovka and let's say Liman direction. During the previous 24 hours we haven't received almost anything. The only important thing we got is another day, another report of the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation. According to the Russians, the Ukrainians lost significant number of soldiers on Liman direction. By the way, this is the second heaviest day probably of Ukrainian losses since the beginning of February, or from the beginning of months. This is the fourth day of the heaviest losses, and we can say that when talking about armored vehicles and light vehicles, tanks, personnel carriers, today is the day with the heaviest, the biggest losses from the Ukrainian side when talking about armored vehicles, tanks, and so on. So, but no geolocations, so we can't let's say make any conclusions. Even mappers haven't published any updates about further Russian progress, let's say along Shuka or along Gloves or along Southern Forest. The same story we can say about Sinkovka direction. No updates, just Ministry of Defense report with let's say normal level of losses, 130, but as you can see, without any progress on the ground. Now we are moving to the south in direction of Vremivka tactical bridgehead. We start receiving also significant number of updates. The Russians has renewed their activity. We have few Lancet strikes. The Russians destroyed or tried to suppress Ukrainian artillery. This is something like artillery preparation or counter-artillery duels before the next wave of attack. Very likely the Russians will try to improve their positions from Priutina to the north in direction of Vrovnopol and Novodarevka. At least 2 artillery systems were destroyed, and these 2 videos were geolocated today, and we received these scenes also just today. So we see some preparation before further activity. When talking about the real actions, we see FAB bombings of the Ukrainian positions to the north of Priutina and to the south of Rivnopol. So very likely this is exactly the direction of further Russian attack or attempt to attack to the north between Novodarevka and the village by the name of Rovnopol. When talking about Rabotina, the Russians also let's say intensified their activity during the previous day. They were bombing this territory heavily. This is the video of bombing of Ukrainian positions on Novodanilovka. The Russians were bombing this territory with FAB. I don't remember when the last time we received the footage or scenes of bombing Orehov and Novodanilovka with FABs. That means something. Probably the Russians have some plans. The Russians bombed the main supply road between Novodanilovka and Rabotina, trying to reduce the Ukrainian logistic and possibilities to support or rotate or reinforce forces inside of the village. And we have the video of FPV drone strike inside the village itself. So we see that the Russians are moving closer and closer, focus deep inside of the village of Rabotina. I'll remind you that most of the forces were redeployed from this area to Avdiivka and Bakhmut-Artyomovsk direction. There are a few brigades left, and let's say the core of defense in this area lays on the shoulders of 65th Mechanized Brigade. So we'll see what the Russians are planning to do. And when talking about Kherson, we got one interesting video from the Ukrainian sources. This one, maybe the Ukrainians made the mistake during the geolocation, but on this video we can see how the Russians were moving from Krynki to the south. And when talking about this geolocation, according to this video, the Russians were moving exactly in the area where the Ukrainians established the flag. If you remember, yesterday the Ukrainians established the flag on the water pump station, and as I understand, this trap worked out. Very likely the Russian commanders ordered the Russians to take off the flag, and the Russians were moving to do this, and the Ukrainians attacked the Russians with FPV drones. So this is the situation here, and as you can see, the Ukrainians continue using these tactics with the trap. And probably one of the most important, very weird and very interesting updates also is coming from Kiev. If you remember, a few weeks ago, we were talking about security agreements that Ukrainians were signing with, they have already signed with United Kingdom, where there were updates about Poland's security agreement to sign with Canada. And we were talking about the security agreement with France. And according to information we have, Macron was planning to visit Kiev these days, but for some reason, few days ago we received a report that Macron took a decision not to visit Kiev to sign agreement, and the reason of that was due to critical situation with some security. So due to security reason, Macron took a decision not to visit Kiev. But today we got additional details about that situation, and according to France 24, Ukrainian authorities were just listen to this very carefully. According to France 24, Ukrainian authorities were preparing an assassination attempt on the French president during Macron's expected visit to Ukraine. It is alleged that this is why the French president cancelled his visit to Ukraine, arguing it was a security issue. The French media says that the head of the GUR, Budanov, the head of Ukrainian intelligence, worked on the operation to eliminate Macron, and he supervised the killers. So as you can see, Zelensky invited Macron. He was planning to kill him, and he was planning to blame Russia in that. So just imagine yourself if it's true. I'm not saying that it's true. I'm just providing you updates that we are receiving these days from the world media and so on. But imagine yourself, if it's true, imagine yourself what happens in his brains, in his head, if he wanted to and then to blame in that Russia. Of course, it's something like that can't even be puzzled in my mind. And furthermore, we have another operation from Budanov, the successful one to kill Macron was unsuccessful attempt from his side. The successful attempt was to destroy Russian ship, and we have the video confirmation that was published by the Ukrainian, let's say, intelligence services, how they destroyed the Russian ship by the name of the Caesar. The ship has the name Cesar Kunikov. And you know that this is very interesting story and very interesting details. Cesar Kunikov is a Russian soldier who was fighting with the Nazi Germany during the Second World War, and he and his group managed to establish control over some bridgehead, and they were holding that bridgehead as long as possible, probably until the main forces arrived. But according to information we have, that's, let's say, Russian soldier Cesar Kunikov was killed in 1943 on the 14th of February. So he was killed on the 14th of February, and today the Ukrainians destroyed the ship with his name at the same date. So this is like a small small things that fits during this operation. The Russians reported, and the sources are saying that operation was completely controlled and coordinated by the US RQ-4B Global Hawk. So obviously this operation stands behind the United States and the United States, let's say, intelligence or military force, or maybe NATO or something like this. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.